Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Obviously, our focus in this particular week's tutorials is character analysis, and we're really trying to understand the ways that Shakespeare has created these characters and the ways in which elements like their interactions with each other, the way they keep secrets, the way they make decisions, influences the eventual outcome of the play. So in the second tutorial in this little series, I'm going to focus on arguably the more dynamic half of the dynamic duo, Lady Macbeth. But in order to make sense of some of the points that I make in her characterization, there's an element of Shakespearean society that we need to understand. And that is references to the four humours. So the four humours is a pseudo-medical way of understanding the way the body worked, which actually dates back to the Greek philosophers, so people like Hippocrates. And the Greek philosophers believed that the body was nothing more than a manipulation of solids and liquids, and that the balance that was achieved between those solids and liquids ultimately led to a happy, healthy life. So the flip side of that, of course, is if your humours, your liquids were out of balance, it would manifest as a dominant personality trait, and you would need to actually change the balance of the liquids in your body, normally by changing your diet, to restore balance. Now, it's important that we connect the idea of the four humours to balance, because our play is one where Acts 2, 3, and 4 show us what happens to a society that's out of balance, where disorder reigns. And the denouement in Act 5 ultimately has to take actions to restore balance, okay? And when we look at the characterization of Lady Macbeth, she is actually undergoing treatment from a physician in Act 5, ideally to restore the balance of her humours to improve her health. And that's not what she needs, and that's what the doctor tells us. But that's just one way that we can look at the relevance of this little bit of science to the play specifically. Okay, so let's have a look at what the four humours involved, what body parts they linked to, and how they actually manifested as different personality traits. Okay, so just for your reference, I have added this into the Road to External Assessment PowerPoint that has all of our vocab that we've discussed in the previous lessons. So it's all in the same place. You can refer to it at any point. And my hope is that you can begin to build an understanding of which of these character types, or which of these humours we actually see manifested in different characters, and why that might be responsible for their actions, or why it might be responsible for them clashing with each other. All right, I'm just going to see if I can pull this down a little bit. Okay, so the four personality types are the names in big bold writing at the top of each of the four boxes. So sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and melancholic. Now, the first thing is that they are associated with one of the liquids of our body. Okay, so sanguine, a word, probably one of the only words from this set of four that's still in use, refers specifically to blood and is associated with the heart. Okay, so those make sense. So you might have heard the word sanguine before. Someone who bleeds out in hospital or in an accident is said to have exsanguinated. So that's still a word that we use. And artists still use the word sanguine to refer to a specific shade of red. Okay, so sanguine personalities are linked to the heart, and their bodily fluid is blood. A choleric personality is linked to yellow bile, and the yellow bile is linked to the liver. Okay, now, why do I make specific reference to the liver and yellow bile and choleric? Okay, because we hear quite often references to people being lily-livered, so white-livered. And that's a way of saying that someone is a coward. And that's really important to choleric personalities because they are naturally dominant personalities. They want to lead, they want to take action, but more on that in a minute. A melancholic personality is associated with black bile, and it's often related to the gallbladder. Melancholic is a word that we still have in use today, and its meaning is virtually unchanged. So someone who suffers from melancholy, someone who appears to be depressed for a long period of time, still means the same thing that it meant when the four humours were considered science. And the last of the personalities is a phlegmatic personality, associated with the liquid known as phlegm. And a phlegmatic personality, they tend to be fairly calm and collected, despite the fact that they have the most awful name. Okay, so when we think about personality traits, then they're always both good and bad character traits to anybody. So someone who is sanguine in nature tends to be warm-blooded, warm-hearted. They love company, they're lively, they're good fun. Yes, they're spontaneous, they're probably our sorry, not sorry personalities. They talk a lot and often quite loudly. So we could probably associate King Duncan with a sanguine personality. He's enjoying the party when he comes to Inverness to visit the Macbeths. He enjoys flirting with Lady Macbeth as the hostess. He wants to be generous and bestow his benevolence on people. And the flip side of that, of course, is while he's so busy being jovial and enjoying the fun of socializing, he's easily distractible. And so that makes him a little too trusting. Okay. But, those people are very charismatic. We naturally like them. Not always, they're often great leaders, but they're not always great leaders, because sometimes there's more flash than substance. This is opposed to choleric personalities, who we would normally associate being our true leaders. The reason we associate them with leadership, particularly in the modern world, is because of some of those really positive character traits. They are focused, goal-oriented, practical, efficient. They want to take action. They want to get to a solution. They're not often put off by obstacles. They're happy to push through. And so the reality is that two of our great villains in the Shakespearean plays, particularly the Shakespearean plays that we are studying, Lady Macbeth and Edmund from King Lear, are choleric personalities. And that makes them hard to completely hate when we look at them from a modern perspective, because a lot of those traits are ones that we now actually really foreground when we choose leaders and when we look at the most efficient way of doing things. All right, our bottom two personalities then, a melancholic personality, normally associated with the colour black, because of the association with black bile. This is somebody who is, when we focus on the positives, is thoughtful and considerate and reflective and take time to plan what they're doing and then stay organised and stay on their plan, stay with their plan. But on the flip side of that, they can become obsessive. They can become too cautious. They find that they are unable to commit to a decision. And so for much of a play like Hamlet is considered melancholic. In fact, he tells people that's exactly what he is. His mother even says in Act 1, cast thy nighted colour off. So take the black off, both literally take off your black garments. It's no longer time to mourn, but also cast thy nighted colour, the blackness of your personality off, because there's lots to be happy about. He's not happy about a lot of things, poor old Hamlet. So he actually holds on to his melancholy for the better part of the play, which is his hamartia. He is unable to act when he needs to. And finally, the last of the personalities is the phlegmatic personality. Now, phlegmatic personality associated, as you can see there, with diplomats, teachers, accountants, technicians. These people do tend to get it done. But in some ways, they're more the person you want in your team, in your group work activity, rather than the leader of your group work activity. They stay calm. They are quiet. they're content to be by themselves. So sometimes we would associate them, our bottom two personalities, as introverts and our top two personalities as extroverts. So phlegmatic personalities are good friends. They observe, they take the time to offer judgments that are normally based on some fact and some reflection and reason. The weaknesses, though, that they can become stubborn, they can appear lazy, they can appear easily ignored, easily walked over. And it is unfortunate that some of our truest characters in Shakespeare, characters like Cordelia from King Lear, and probably, to be fair, Banquo, are phlegmatic personalities. These are good people, but because they are sitting in opposition to another kind of personality trait, arguably someone whose particular course of action is violent, leads to their downfall. Last thing to point out is the arrows along the top of this particular diagram and down the side. So the wet and dry arrows at the top, which refer to the two columns of this particular table, refer to the way in which a character reacts when challenged. Okay, so wet personalities, they're short-lived responses. They blow up and then they let go of it. A dry response is going to stay the course. They're going to hold grudges, which means that they can manifest as vengeful or can hold on to a hurt for a long time in the case of a melancholic personality. As I said, a short-lived response blows up or enjoys the moment and then moves on. But then we have the two arrows here on the side of the response, which highlights the two rows. And this is how quick they are to respond. Okay, so the ones along the top is whether they react and then return to normal, or react and stay angry or stay sad. This one on the top, along the side, is how long it takes them to react. So hot personalities, that's sanguine and choleric personalities, will react quickly. They see an obstacle, they flare up immediately. A sanguine personality will flare up at the drop of a hat and then calm back down really quickly. A choleric personality is going to see that opposition, they're going to flare up, and then they're going to stay the course until they've got their revenge. By contrast, the slow responses, the phlegmatic and melancholic personalities, are going to take a long time before they react. Because phlegmatic personalities, think about it. Melancholic personalities are often cautious in taking action because of the consequences. And as a result, by the time you get an action out of them, you know that they've really thought it through. So they really mean what they've said. Okay, so that's a little brief summary of the four humours, and I strongly recommend that you connect with an understanding of the four humours in a little bit more detail, particularly if you'd like to see how it influences characters beyond Macbeth. But certainly, you know, when we look at characters like Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, and King Duncan, just to name a few, we can see that their personality traits are in opposition from the start. That if they had been entirely moral people, then they would have only acted on the strengths associated with their their personality traits or personality type. But because they're also driven by an either internal evil, an internal immorality, they actually then manifest their personality in those negative traits. And that ultimately leads to our characters' downfalls in a tragedy, rather than celebrating their strengths and their successes as we would in perhaps a comedy or a history. Okay, so that's all for this little tutorial. Stay tuned. We're going to look at Lady Macbeth across the 5 acts and think about what it is that we learn about relationship and influence in her role in the play with Macbeth. Till then, see you later.